My name is Audra Winter. I am the creator of the world of Gardian, which is a fantasy world based around the zodiac signs, and I am the author of a book called The Age of Scorpius, which is the debut novel to this world. It is available on TikTok right now for pre-order. Little bit of a flex here. I have sold about 1,400 copies on pre-order for a debut. I am an independent author. Cool stuff.
So that is an author named Audra Winter. She is 22 years old, and she has made quite the name for herself on TikTok, racking up over 150,000 followers. For the past 4 years, Audra has been chronicling the creation of her first ever debut novel, The Age of Scorpius, set in the world of Gardian, a fantasy universe based on the zodiac signs. Audra has worked on this series since she was 12, and she's been hyping it up for quite a while, getting people really excited for her first book and sharing her journey to publication. From what I understand, she went for a non-traditional indie author route, meaning that she did not partake in the traditional process of querying literary agencies who sell books to major publishing houses for distribution. Instead, she took on the business part of it all herself, supporting the book's distribution largely through the TikTok shop and crowdfunding platforms like Patreon. And all of that is fine. Thanks to the internet, there are so many ways to get your work published through non-traditional, less expensive means. But Audra clearly had her heart set on something greater for this series, despite its humble self-publishing roots. She hired a team of artists and graphic designers to support future world-building efforts with aspirations for a fully fledged multimedia studio.
That is how we started up an entire studio, because we retain most of our profit, because we function as our own publisher, which is super cool. So we're just really finding avenues to do what we enjoy while making it our career. And I'm glad to be able to represent that, and I'm glad to be able to have a space where artists and writers are on the same level.
Audra also put a lot of herself into this book, like many authors do. The protagonist is a neurodivergent woman, and the book has themes of resistance against fascist regimes, queer romance, all things that she strongly believes in. Audra would get emotional about this, sometimes posting herself crying about how much it meant to her to be getting her work out there. She also says that the neurodivergence of the main character even impacted her prose, interpreting the main character's voice in a way that Audra, or generally speaking, a neurodivergent person, would see and perceive the world. All of these aspects really made you want to root for Audra. I remember before this whole controversy, as the launch of her book was getting closer, I would come across her content on TikTok and not really paying attention or knowing much about her. I'd be like, hell yeah, this world building seems cool, people seem really excited about this project, like, how could that possibly go wrong, right? Additionally, it seemed like she put a lot of care into treating her artists well. She was very anti-AI. Like, it was a nice story that I think a lot of people wanted to get behind, whether they knew the full context of who she was and what she was doing or not. And people were responding with the same level of enthusiasm that she had, often telling Audra that the world of Gardian would be the next Harry Potter or Game of Thrones, that this would be the thing that all of their kids would one day be obsessed with for generations to come. And that positively translated into sales. Audra sold 6,000 pre-order copies, which is practically unheard of for a debut indie author. People were practically counting down the days until they would receive copies of her book. There was just one problem, though. No one had ever read a page.
I'm not going to say any names, but there's somebody on BookTok right now, an indie author, who's feeling the full weight of BookTok's wrath.
It's going to take more than 4 months to rewrite a book that is that bad.
This was an unedited, unfinished product.
So typically when a book is crowdfunded like this, the author will give a sneak peek or an excerpt so people can get an idea of what they're actually pre-ordering. Some people claim that Audra posted the first 4 pages of the book back in June, although I couldn't find that on her feed. Hello, it's Kayla from the future. I wrote and recorded this over multiple days. So I did actually find the clip where she posted the first 4 pages of it back in June. I don't know why it wasn't coming up on my TikTok feed when I went to look for it the first time, but it is there, it does exist, and I think it gives a little bit more insight into why people are so frustrated with Audra's response to criticism, because when she did post those pages, people were criticizing her a bit in the comments, and I'm posting some of the responses here that are still up, in which she seemed a little bit defensive, and she just waved off the concerns of anyone who even suggested that there might be a problem. Because while I was researching this story, I saw a whole lot of Audra's very defensive, we should not give her any grace and kindness, she put herself in this mess because she's so defensive. And I didn't see any of that defensiveness until I came across this TikTok, which just so happens to contain the only pages that were ever released of this book before, it went to print, right? But even then, it's just a tiny excerpt. It's not even a full chapter. But from what I understand, the actual finished product of this book does not match the robust marketing campaign that it was given. I mean, the book's art and supplemental materials, like the bookmarks and all of that, it looks very polished and professional, and that's presumably because she collaborated with real professional artists to get it done. But the writing, it's a bit subpar. Okay, it actually took me a while to find a synopsis of this book, so I finally found one, and I'm gonna read it to you because I think, having that information in background might be important. So here we go. 18-year-old Rika Spring has been determined all her life to piece together Gardian's fragmented historical record and reverse her sign's emotionless code of honor. Remember, this is like a zodiac sign-based world. Sort of like Divergent, but instead of separating you on your, personality, I guess, they separate you based on your zodiac sign. If this was legit, because I'm a Pisces, we would be fucked, you guys. Like, if we had to, operate within the confines of our own society, like, we would be cooked. Anyway, when she finally locates an ancient archive containing classified knowledge of Gardian's history, Rika discovers a scroll that reveals the existence of a mythological weapon and uncovers the truth behind the Scorpio code. It's nothing more than a manipulation tactic to keep Scorpio in power. Violating the code's holy orders is punishable by death, and Rika's broken the first tenet, never show emotion. Unless she wants to be murdered for displaying her anger against the law's will, she must find and prove that a mythological weapon is more than a story before she's killed by the hauntingly familiar assassin sent to stop her. Now, this fantasy, romantasy genre has never really been my thing anyway. I like thrillers or horny romances, sue me, I guess, but regardless of how that synopsis makes you feel, the writing itself seems to be a bit less than quality, especially for someone who claims to have been writing it for 10 years. The prose is very stilted and repetitive, there are grammar and spelling mistakes present throughout, and the characters seem flat and not fully developed. These are problems that could have been fixed with some really serious editing, which is often part of the traditional query literary process, but she didn't go that route, although that's not to say that indie writers don't ever edit their work, a lot of them do. Audra had editors too. 2 of them are credited, but I think people are assuming that, like the artists who did the world building work, they are probably her friends, and friends are less likely to pick through a manuscript in the way that is probably warranted after you spent a decade writing this work. Part of the problem with writing and editing your own passion project is that you're oftentimes unable to separate yourself from it, which is why you need an outside perspective. Let's talk about that for a minute. Remember when I said when I first came across Audra's content, I didn't know much about her? I feel like she definitely presents a bit older than she actually is, because when I first saw her videos, I had no idea that she was 22. I would not trust 22-year-old me to, cook me dinner or put gas in my car at this point. Anything that I wrote creatively, pre-frontal lobe development, trust me, will never see the light of day. So I guess good on her for having the confidence to sort of move forward at such a young age, and she was working on this whole thing since she was 12 years old. I'm just saying, I feel like her age puts a lot of things into perspective here. So all of this to say that I do genuinely feel bad for her in that way, because I don't think she did all of this out of malice or to scam people. I think this is a problem born out of inexperience and immaturity, compounded with the fact that the internet loves to tear people down, especially when their success is perceived to be unwarranted or they happen to be cocky about said success. Which Audra definitely was. This was a complete recipe for disaster. Audra's Goodreads page was disabled due to incredibly low reviews, and now people are asking for refunds, which, here's my tangent on the refund bit. Sure, this is definitely an incomplete product that is being sold, but it's not her fault that you bought it. It's not like she presented a polished, well-written first chapter and then gave you an unfinished book written by a 6th grader. She just gave you an unfinished book written by a 6th grader and told you that it was the next big thing on BookTok, and you fell for the marketing. I don't think she owes anyone shit. Did I get a refund for Madam Web? No, I ate that cost and made that money back by shitting on it in a YouTube video like a real hater. You are not entitled to be compensated for wasting your time engaging in bad art. that is your own fault. Okay, so Audra did respond. I'm not going to play the full 9-minute clip of her response. I'm just going to play a cut down version with some of the major points that I'm going to hit on, but if you want to see her full response, that is linked in the description down below.
My name is Audra Winter, and I am going to be redoing this book. My entire life flipped upside down. I was in so much shock that I absolutely lost sight of what was most important, and that was delivering my voice and my story in the best way that I could. I did myself an injustice, and I did my story an injustice, but I don't give up. I especially don't give up on the thing that matters the most to me, and that is storytelling and bringing other people joy. So here is what I am doing to make that right. We're re-releasing the entire thing. I have taken the feedback and the criticisms that I've received, especially in the past week, and I have discussed them and processed them in this time that I was not on the app, and I genuinely so badly want to make this the best that it can be. I am recruiting a copy editor and a proofreader from my audience, so people that are watching my videos, because I am receiving a lot of wonderful feedback. And I do have a lot of authors and writers and editors who follow me, and there are people who want to help, and I'm seeing that and I'm recognizing that, so I want to be able to find someone from my readers and from the people who are supporting me to be on my team. I will be opening auditions for that on Tuesday. It's literally just going through the first chapter of the book and marking it up as much as you can. We're going to be looking at the different styles, and then we'll be doing onboarding by the end of next week for these revisions to start. We are offering anybody who has bought any version of the book a free digital copy. You can go onto our website, and we have a form for that, where if you want to put in the order number from whatever platform you bought the book on, you can put yourself on a list to receive a digital copy once we finished and have that ready in December. For those of you that bought the hardcover already, we are offering a 50% discount on a $30 book. The price is going up a little bit because we're improving the quality of the book as a whole, not just the writing. We're adding more art and more involvement from a whole creative team, and the features of the book, different cover, different interior, different end pages, sprayed edges. We're going all out. We're going all out.
So this is in fact the first ever book to get patch notes, I guess. Let's focus on the writing part here first. She says she's going to audition some editors to clean things up, and that she will be putting out a revised version of the story by December, which, judging by the quality of the book's first iteration, this is a rather lofty timeline to get this completed. She also says that she'll be posting the edits for the sake of transparency to show that these changes are actively being made. Additionally, she says she's going to make a bunch of aesthetic improvements for this new special edition, but with that comes a slight price raise from the initial price that people paid for the original copy. A lot of people are pointing out that this was never what was wrong with the book to begin with. The art associated with the project was one of the few things that people actually liked about it. This is reinforcing for people that it seems like Audra doesn't quite care about the quality of the writing beyond the direct criticism that she has received about it. She may not know the extent to which this needs to be rewritten, and so she's using aesthetic improvements to cover that fact. Finally, she talks about the bullying she has experienced, how this has been very draining and triggering, and I could only imagine. This image of yourself that you've built up comes crashing down once people have the chance to actually read your work. I think there's really something to be said for how we're only willing to put ourselves out there once we've already done the work behind the scenes to build ourselves up. And what I mean by that is, I started making YouTube videos 5 years ago. For 2 of those 5 years, maybe 3 of those 5 years, the majority of people in my personal life did not even know that I did that. I never put it on my social media outside of like my channel specific social media. I didn't put my face out there quite as much. I used to talk behind an animated avatar, for Christ's sake. Real ones remember the Pit Crew era, right? But my point is that like, I viewed what I was doing on this channel as cringe and embarrassing until one day it wasn't. And now I get to reap that benefit of the success that I've had, but there were a lot of mistakes and a lot of wrong turns and a lot of cringy actions to get there. But we don't leave any room for that, right? We don't leave any grace for that. And that, I think, is part of what leads to situations like this and why they get so toxic. Audra did a lot wrong here, and I think this comes from the pressure on social media to properly brand yourself. Nobody can just have a regular hobby anymore. It's cringe to write for the sake of writing unless you're having enormous immediate success and profiting off of what you've made. A lot of Audra's perceived victories were a facade, but she was ultimately just copying what success looked like for other people. At the end of the day, all of social media has become its own meta performance. It's not a space for anyone to be vulnerable or a messy, unpolished version of themselves. They are pressured to bring a curated persona to the forefront, ignoring the fact that there has to be learning and growing done along the way. Since this whole story blew up, I've seen a lot of TikToks from other indie writers saying that they're watching their biggest fear play out in real time. That they're scared to put their own work forward because of what happened to Audra. And there's something about that that is deeply and profoundly sad to me. As someone who also writes creatively, it is an often vulnerable and personal experience. And I feel like that's all been overwritten by the fact that social media has turned everybody into this super competent, polished marketing executive, because that's what you have to be to gain credibility in the space and get people to read or watch whatever it is that you're putting out. There's a poet who I love named Ocean Vuong, who is also a teacher, and they summed this up pretty well in an interview that they did recently on cringe culture and why it's harming vulnerable pursuits such as the craft and art of writing.
There's a kind of surveillance culture around social media, and they would say, I want to be a poet, I want to be a good writer, but it's a bit cringe, right? This cringe culture is that I don't want to be perceived as trying and having an effortful attempt at my dreams. And as a teacher, that's a horrifying sort of report from the field. And so I think they are absolutely scared of judgment. And so in fact, they perform cynicism because cynicism can be misread, as it often is, as intelligence. You know, you are disaffected, you're too cool, you've seen it all. And so they pull back. But in fact, they are deeply hungry for sincere, earnest effort.
It's very easy for me to point out all of the things that Audra did wrong here, and it's been fascinating to watch all of this unfold in real time. But the cognitive dissonance of it all has been astounding to me, in the sense that all of these readers who excitedly pre-ordered this book cannot seem to accept any blame in the fact that they were duped by some marketing by a 22-year-old, seemingly defying the odds of every inexperienced indie author before her. Furthermore, I hate that this avoidable mess is making every single person who has a creative spark, whether it be writing or designing or something else, feel like they shouldn't even try. That sucks. I need everybody to get back in touch with your own humanity. Get more vulnerable right now. This was my first real foray into BookTok drama. I always joke all the time that I can't read, but it's actually just that, like, I don't know. I used to really like reading. I don't have a ton of time to read nowadays. My sister, who is a librarian, yells at me for that literally all the time. So I generally stay out of BookTok's orbit, but I became very fascinated with this drama and with this controversy, but I was sort of amazed at how toxic things got so quickly. But out of all of that noise, there is one perspective from one creator that really stood out to me, and I think it's a good place to end this video on, so I'm gonna play that now.
Look, authors are mad at Audra Winter because Audra Winter gave herself permission to be bad and to publish anyway. She looked at herself and went, perfect is the enemy of done, and just went for it. Now that is a skill that a lot of authors, quite frankly, lack. It's a level of skill with marketing, sales, and business, and a level of audacity that some of us will go to school for or practice our whole lives for and never really develop. She has it, and it makes people very mad and triggers, I think, a lot of wounds around their writing, their level of success, their skills and their acumen, and their dreams. And that's why the critique around Audra Winter sounds the way that it does.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I know this video was like kind of different, but the last couple of videos have been very intense for me, both views-wise and audience-wise, and there's a ton of new people here, and you know, those were some controversial subjects, and so I thought it would be, I don't know, more fun to do something a little lighter and a little bit different, and if it's a total flop, then of course we will pretend it never happened and I will never do it again. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. made you the villain. Evil for just moving on. I see a shadow, I see it even with the lights off. I made a promise if in 4 months this feeling ain't gone, well fuck this city, I'm moving to Saskatchewan. It's just another day that it's not over.